US President Joe Biden is en route to the Middle East as tensions in the region ramped up over a strike on a Gaza hospital compound.
At least 500 people are dead from the blast. Hamas has blamed Israel for the attack, while Israel's military blamed a malfunctioning rocket fired by Islamic Jihad militants in Gaza.
Fury has erupted among Israel's neighbors over the attack. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas will no longer meet with Mr. Biden, saying Israel has crossed all red lines. Jordan also cancelled a summit it was to host with President Biden and Egyptian and Palestinian leaders.
For more on this, we're joined by Greg Barton, Chair of Global Islamic Politics at Deakin University. Professor Barton joins us from Jakarta. Good day, Professor. So here we are, President Biden. He's going to be near an expanding war zone in what some are calling an extraordinary show of support for Israel. Officials even releasing details of his travel plans in advance. Is this trip necessary? How great are the physical risks?
I think the physical risks for the president are very minimal. I think that the trip is necessary because, of course, the US would show solidarity with Israel, but it's a chance to quietly work one-on-one to urge restraint on the part of the Israelis. I mean, I think President Biden is thinking about the end state, which involves a political solution. What we're seeing with the tragic situation in Gaza and the Hamas terrorist attack is that securitizing Gaza doesn't provide lasting peace. There has to be a just and durable political solution. So I think that's what President Biden is ultimately focused on. Of course, his words will be very much in solidarity with Israel, but quietly there's concerns about what can happen in Gaza and how that can sabotage chances for a durable peace.
It's not just Biden that's making his way. U.S. Marine Rapid Response Force is also headed to the waters off the coast of Israel, escalating the U.S.'s show of force in the region. How real is the prospect of the Israel-Hamas conflict from widening further?
Look, the potential, if it should widen further, is for enormous tragedy, even for a regional war. The probability is probably, hopefully, relatively low, but the consequences are too awful to think about. So it does make sense that the US prepare. But even with positioning two US aircraft carriers, which is a remarkable show of strength, it's not clear whether the US will be prepared to take action in time if things do escalate. So it's a really uncertain situation. If Israel believed that Tehran was knowingly guiding the Hamas terrorist attack, then we would assume that Israel would have struck Iran by now. So perhaps there's some hope there that Tehran wasn't directly in the loop, even though they've sponsored and supported Hamas. And of course, Tehran is the puppet master when it comes to Hezbollah in Lebanon. So this is very much a show of deterrence, but things could go badly wrong.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has canceled a meeting with Biden in the wake of that hospital strike. Also, Jordan's King Abdullah canceling the entire summit with Egyptian and Palestinian leaders. Professor, how much is this going to undermine Biden's diplomatic efforts?
It depends on whether we can get a quick recovery from this or not. The truth will come out in what happened with the Al-Ahli hospital. There's so much signals intelligence, so much visual feed. The problem is that people have made up their own mind about what's happened, and so there are quite contradictory positions taken. So that may be impossible to undo that damage. I think President Biden's team will be working very, very hard to try and get positive proof out to the public on what they believe has happened, and then to proceed on that basis, but it may be too late.
There is a clear mismatch between the military capabilities of Israel and Hamas. Instead of arming one side, shouldn't the U.S. be looking to uphold international humanitarian law or the law of war on both sides of the conflict?
Oh, it certainly should be pushing everyone involved to uphold laws of conflict and to avoid war crimes. The fact that Israel needs to make a response to Hamas is, I think, pretty clear. That's what America's position is. I don't think there's any surprise with that. The question is how much restraint it can exercise in the way in which Israel launches a ground invasion. And we're already seeing the air campaign in Gaza. We've seen thousands of lives lost already. There is the potential for tens of thousands of lives to be lost. And so that question of restraint and accountability is key. As I said, I think President Biden's team is focused on an eventual political solution, as difficult as it seems to imagine that, because that is the only way we're going to get a lasting peace in the region. But there's a lot to happen first. So it's not surprising that this is an absolute priority for the Biden White House team.
Professor Winston Churchill famously once said, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." How is President Biden going to leverage what's happening in the Middle East to gain traction with his domestic audience, given he's seeking re-election in 2024?
Well, I think the first thing is, I hope that the focus is on finding a lasting, durable, just peace with Israel and Gaza and the Palestinians. I think that's something Biden believes in and will commit to. How that plays out for a domestic audience is not at all clear. I'm not sure at this moment his focus is very much on the domestic audience. It's true, coming up to a possible re-election in 12 months' time, he's pushed through a lot of domestic reforms, hasn't got a lot of credit for that. It's a tough environment. I'm not sure that he's counting on what's happening now, which is a development that no one really wanted to see happen with Israel and Gaza, as something that's going to, reap a windfall for him politically in America.
Yeah, and coming back to the region, how has the escalation of this conflict upended Biden's two-pronged Middle East strategy of brokering an Israeli-Saudi détente and containing Iran's nuclear ambitions?
Well, there's good reason to interpret the Hamas terrorist attack is designed to sabotage those initiatives, particularly the détente with Saudi. How they can recover from this is the question. The only lasting solution will be a just and durable peace that won't involve Hamas. Hamas has now dealt themselves out of that. The question is in destroying Hamas's military capacity and taking them out of the equation. What sort of collateral damage? How many civilians will lose their life? What sort of erosion of trust will there be? Will it be even possible to build a political solution after that? That's the real challenge. I think Saudi Arabia will hold back and wait and see what happens. So there's a lot of wait and see when it comes to what influence America and its allies can influence over Israel, and not just over Israel. Within Israel, of course, we now have a crisis coalition, emergency government, and there are many sensible voices in that government in what had been prior to this an extremely right-wing government. So there's a lot of investment on the ground. A lot of Israelis want to see a peace and recognise that a hard military solution will never buy them lasting peace. And of course, on the Palestinian side, they're living a nightmare. Most people in the Gaza Strip don't support Hamas or Islamic Jihad or other such groups. So there's a lot of focus on trying to find a way out of this, but trust is in short supply. We're facing an information war as well as a war involving conventional munitions, and there's a lot of disinformation and misinformation going around at the moment.
We have seen Lloyd Austin, Antony Blinken, now Biden heading to this region, some saying it's all meant to buy time for civilians to seek refuge. But once Biden leaves this region, Professor, what do you expect next in terms of the pace and scope of military operations?
Well, it looks inevitable there will be a IDF ground incursion into Gaza. All the signals point to that. And of course, the calls to clear out Gaza City in the north are a prelude to that. And of course, it is good that there has been some delay on that ground operation, because just moving 1.1 million people from Gaza City to somewhere in the southern part of the Gaza Strip where there's no spare housing, there's not even water or electricity. And of course, many people who are in hospital can't be moved. The slowing things down is important. Once Biden does leave and once Israel does proceed with its operation, as we expect, the question is how much restraint is shown and how much pressure is on them to be very surgical with their strikes and not indiscriminate with their force. There's a lot of ugly rhetoric coming out of Israeli political discourse at the moment that speaks against restraint. So this is a really critical time.
Professor, appreciate your insights this morning. Thanks very much for joining us. Greg Barton, Chair of Global Islamic Politics at Deakin University.